Good afternoon and welcome to the Watchman Report telecast. We broadcast to the world for Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ. My name is Alan Singler and my co-host is Gwen Fallow. We are your watchmen and watchwomen on the wall. We call Jesus Christ by his Hebrew name, Yeshua HaMashiach. This is our special Pearl Harbor Day telecast, and our special guest is our friend and fellow Christian, Jack Brendamore, a U.S. Navy World War II veteran.
So we welcome you, Jack.
Thank you.
So friends, there are 139 days until the blood moons and solar eclipses begin on the 15th of April 2014, Nissan 5774. On Passover 2014, the first of a series of mysterious astronomical events will occur that will have Christians looking up at the night skies and affect the world. Pastor Mark Blitz made an amazing discovery in 2008. Blitz had been studying prophecies that focus on the sun and moon. These prophecies are God's signal to his chosen people and Christians, like 1, if by land, 2, if by sea during the American Revolution. The Hebrew word implies it's a signal for coming or his appearing. I believe Pastor Blitz is correct, and these signals are divine appointments. In the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 14, God states that the lights in the sky would be for signs and for seasons. Over the last 500 years, blood red moons have fallen on the first day of Passover 3 separate times. These occurrences were connected to some of the most significant days in Jewish history. For example, in 1492-1493, the final year of the Spanish Inquisition, Jews were expelled from Spain. Every heavenly body is controlled by the unseen hand of God, and heavenly bodies signal coming events to humanity. There are no cosmic accidents in God's universe. Friends, take heed and prayerfully prepare, because the next series of 4 blood moons occurs at Passover and Feast of Tabernacles in 2014, and Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles in 2015. In the Old Testament, the prophet Joel, chapter 2, verse 31 states, "The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come." In the New Testament, Matthew 24, 29-30, Jesus is quoted as saying, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory." Acts 2 states, "And I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes." Pastor Blitz stated, "God wants us to look at the biblical calendar. The reason we need to be watching is because God will signal his appearance, but we have to know what to be watching as well." Friends, we need to be watching the Jewish feasts and their correlation to blood moons and solar eclipses. Blood moons occur during lunar eclipses. In 2015, 2 eclipses occur. The first on 20 March 2015, the Jewish New Year, the high holy day of Rosh Hashanah, and the second eclipse occurs on the 13th September 2015, the Feast of Trumpets. This date coincides with Israel's and America's, how do you say that word?
Shemitah.
Shemitah. So friends, this is not hocus pocus. These blood moons and solar eclipses are based on NASA projections and recorded celestial history. Now is the time to accept Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ, as your Lord, Messiah, and Savior. Get ready for a roller coaster ride beginning in spring 2014 because Israel's and your redemption is drawing nigh.
That's not very far off either. We have a second countdown that's occurring. We, the American people, and the Israelis have begun another countdown to our next harbinger in Shemitah. We have 653 days. Let me repeat that. 653 days to our next Shemitah. On September 13th, 2015, or the 29th of Elul, the year 5775 on the Hebrew calendar. Friends, prepare yourself. Time is running short. Let me remind you, America faced its first Shemitah on 9/11/01 with the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Our second Shemitah occurred on 2008 with a financial meltdown. Shemitahs occur every 7 years if a person or nation refuses to repent. To date, we have refused to repent before our God. In fact, Tom Daschle and John Edwards and Obama all defied God and said that the people of the United States would build bigger, better, and stronger. They refused to repent. This caused Daschle and Edwards' downfall. Obama awaits his Shemitah. Look carefully at the date, September 13th. 13, of course, is Satan's number. Let me say again, we have little less than 2 years to repent. Rabbi Kahn believes our next Shemitah will be financial in nature, while Obama is facing his personal Shemitah. If he does not repent, God will cause his downfall. I do not know how or when this downfall will take place, but it will happen. If you wish to read more about harbingers in the Shemitah, see Watchman reports on my blog, Watchman Report 13-470 and Watchman Report 13-109 concerning blood moons, tetrads, solar eclipses, and harbingers. Ladies and gentlemen, 72 years ago today, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. More than 2,400 people lost their lives on that day. More than 18 ships were sunk or heavily damaged, and more than 130 medals, including 16 Medals of Honor, were awarded to those who fought valiantly on that day to defend America against attack. The next day, President Roosevelt opened his speech to Congress with his famous "This day will live in infamy" speech. This is certainly the case and reason for us to pause 72 years later to remember what happened and to learn some valuable lessons. And I wear my uniform today to honor those veterans like Jack and others who have so valiantly defended this country. I keep wanting to say violently. That is certainly the case and a reason for us to pause 72 years later to remember what happened and to learn some valuable lessons, especially in context with the recent peace deal with Iran. One lesson we need to learn again is that politicians and military leaders make assumptions about the enemy that are wrong. Friends, we are repeating that mistake again in regards to Iran. Our leaders and citizens in the 1940s falsely thought that Japan would not attack the United States because we had a superior military strength and excellent industrial capacity. Well, our army in 1941 was the size of the Romanian army. It was tiny. Our leaders also falsely believed that if Japan dared to attack us, we would quickly defeat them because our military and of our industrial superiority. We were wrong on both these counts. Another lesson we should have learned was never to underestimate the capability, resolve, and resourcefulness of the enemy. The Japanese were determined fighters who fought to the bitter end. Most of the military did not respect the fighting abilities of the Japanese, nor did they understand their advanced military technological innovation at that time. The Japanese turned out to be tougher to fight than we expected, and more resourceful than we gave them credit for. Another lesson we should have learned is to prepare those in uniform for the unexpected, or as we say today, to think out of the box. Although the military in Hawaii were trained and combat ready, they were not well trained to defend against an air attack. For example, new radar was installed in Hawaii. but it was only used 1 hour per day for training. Also, the radar operators were not adequately trained on the equipment and did not know how to determine whether the aircraft were friend or foe. Today, as we remember those who died 72 years ago, we will honor their sacrifice most by learning the lessons from Pearl Harbor so that America will be prepared for the future. Because, friends, I am afraid that the Psalm 83 war is on the immediate horizon, and America is spiritually and morally unprepared for this coming war. Now, I'd like to, before we honor our guest here, I'd like to make some notes from Admiral Chester Nimitz' book, Reflections on Pearl Harbor. They're very interesting. Admiral Nimitz was attending a concert in Washington, D.C. when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. He was paged and told there was a phone call for him. When he answered the phone, it was President Franklin Delano Roosevelt on the phone. He told Nimitz that he would be the commander of the Pacific Fleet. Admiral Nimitz assumed command of the Pacific Fleet, and he landed in Pearl Harbor on Christmas Eve, 1941. There was such a spirit of despair, dejection, and defeat, you would have thought the Japanese had already won the war. On Christmas Day, 1941, Admiral Nimitz was given a boat tour of the destruction wrought on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. Big sunken battleships and Navy vessels cluttered the waters everywhere you looked. As the tour boat returned to the dock, the young helmsman on the boat asked, "Well, Admiral, what do you think after seeing all this destruction?" Admiral Nimitz' reply shocked everyone within the sound of his voice. Admiral Nimitz said, I get goosebumps just reading this, "The Japanese made 3 of the biggest mistakes an attack force could ever make, or God was taking care of America. Which do you think it was?" Shocked and surprised, the young helmsman asked, "What do you mean by saying the Japanese made the 3 biggest mistakes an attack force ever made?" Mistake number 1, the Japanese attacked on Sunday morning. 9 out of every 10 crewmen on those ships were ashore on leave. If those same ships had been lured to the sea and sunk, we would have lost 38,000 men instead of 3,800. Mistake number 2, when the Japanese saw all those battleships lined in a row, they got so carried away with sinking those battleships, they never once bombed our dry docks opposite those ships. If they had destroyed our dry docks, they would have had to tow every one of those ships to America to be repaired. As it is now, the ships are in shallow water and can be raised. One tug can pull them over to the dry docks, and we can have them repaired and at sea by the time we could have towed them to America. And I already have crews ashore anxious to man those ships. Mistake number 3, every drop of fuel in the Pacific theater of war is on top of the ground storage tanks 5 miles away from that hill. One attack plane could have strafed those tanks and destroyed all of our fuel. That's why I say the Japanese made 3 of the biggest mistakes an attack force could make, or God was taking care of America. There is a reason that our national motto is, "In God We Trust." Pretty moving words by the Admiral. I'd like to add another point to what the Admiral said by adding mistake number 4. All the ships damaged and sunk at Pearl Harbor were old. The new aircraft carriers and newer ships were deliberately kept at sea so that they could not be damaged or sunk. Well, Jack, I get goosebumps reading about this stuff and talking about this stuff. Where were you on December 7th, 1941?
I was at a movie at the I'm not sure the area. It's it's right on Reading Road.
Okay.
And we were actually at the movie. And of course, I was at that time I was still a sophomore in high school.
Okay. And what did you know where Pearl Harbor was?
Yes, I did know that.
How did you happen to know that?
Because I was interested in the Navy and
Okay.
and did know a little bit about Pearl Harbor.
Okay, so you were a sophomore at Withrow High School?
Yeah, Withrow High School.
And you were in this kind of a special category of your friends and classmates as far as your graduation from Withrow is concerned. Tell us about that.
Well, I actually, my final game of football was played, and 9 of us on the football team and cheerleaders joined the Navy together, thinking that we would be able to all go together to training. As it turned out, 3 of us went to Sampson, New York, 3 to Great Lakes, and 3 to San Diego, and we didn't see any of us again till the end of the war.
During the course of the war.
That's right.
Where is Sampson, New York?
It was upper New York, Oswego area.
Okay, so up
Lake
more
Ontario.
towards Great Lakes.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. I have a display on a graphic here of the course of the Japanese Aircraft Carrier Task Force and the route they took to bomb Pearl Harbor, and then their route back to Japan. Of course, from the movie Tora, 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 and the movie The Battle of Midway, we know that they took a northerly course, and then
Went
the
south.
planes flew from the north to attack Pearl Harbor.
What was your reaction to that bombing as a high school student, and generally speaking, the school?
Well, I don't think we knew that much about Pearl Harbor at that time. Of course, it was the Navy people did, but being students in high school, we really weren't concerned as much as we should have been, I think.
But you were moved at least to all those 9 of you to decide to join the Navy.
Yes.
So there must have been some kind of patriotic.
Oh, there was
Feeling.
very definitely. I wanted to be part of the war.
Okay.
And so did the other groups, and I'm very fortunate. They shortened our. We had a 14-day period after our training, and they were shortened down to 10 days, and we got on a railroad car, three stories high, with guys that have been picking them up on the way, and we landed up in California, and fortunately enough, I was ordered to the USS Hopewell, and went to the Hopewell almost immediately, and got my training at sea.
And the Hopewell was DD what?
681.
681, and that was a
Fletcher class ship. The Fletcher class
destroyer, correct?
Destroyer, yes.
Okay.
The Fletcher was one of our destroyers in our squadron.
Okay.
So, and we had the Kid and of course the Hopewell. We were very fortunate. We didn't have any attack after the original one at Corregidor, where I was a replacement for. They lost 12 men in that attack.
So when you were at a theater watching a movie, did they break in? Did they make an announcement that Pearl Harbor had been bombed?
Yes, they did.
And what do you recall that they said?
Well, we didn't really, we weren't that familiar with where Pearl Harbor was, and it was really amazing the interest that we all had, even though we were still sophomores in high school. So it was important that we knew where Pearl Harbor was. We found that out, of course.
Did the people in the theater start chatting and?
Oh yes, it disturbed the whole. We left then, and
Okay.
And
Oh, interesting.
Did you and the other people realize that this was war?
no, not at that time. We did the next day.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where did you listen to I assume you listened to the president on the radio.
Right.
Where did you listen to him on the radio?
At the school.
Okay.
The next day, they put it on intercom.
And then what was the reaction of your fellow students?
The ones that were older, knew that they were going to have to go and change their ways because they were going to go.
Seniors.
Seniors, sure, they were going to go to war.
Okay. Well, I also have a graphic here of the famous Battleship Row, and you can see how the ships were lined up, beginning at the top with the Nevada and the famous Arizona, the Tennessee and the West Virginia, the Maryland, the Oklahoma, the California, and finally the Pennsylvania was down here. During your course of your tenure in the Navy, did you end up going to Pearl Harbor?
Oh yes, yeah. We actually headed for Pearl Harbor when I joined the ship.
Okay.
So I was actually started my training on board ship as a replacement.
Was any of the destruction still evident by the time you
No.
reached Pearl Harbor?
No.
Did it
Oh, you
be-
mean as far as Pearl Harbor was concerned?
Well, the sunken.
Oh
you know,
yes, that was very much so.
Do you remember seeing the Arizona?
Sure did.
And what was your reaction when you saw that?
Well, it was to see the bubbling of the water and gas and oil coming up, and which is still happening today.
Right.
Was a very moving thing.
And then it was time for combat.
Well, that's right. We knew that we were going. We tied up to another destroyer, not in our squadron, and those engines were ready and never shut down. So
Now, some of the listeners like me, I'm not real familiar with what squadron means.
well, a squadron it's made up of so many ships, and it was the 21st. Our squadron was the 21st squadron. I assume probably it was 21st because there was 20 other ones earlier on,
Right.
World War I, and of course these were all modern ships. The Fletcher class was the first new destroyer that we had built, and they started building it immediately. They built 400. It's hard to believe, but there were over 400.
That's amazing.
So in that squadron, how many ships?
Eight originally, eight, and then we actually went into Japan with 6, and we were heading to meet the Third Fleet. We were the 7th, and because we were heading to Japan. There's no question that if we wouldn't have attacked the way we did, I think we would have had to go on land and go into Tokyo Bay, and Yokohama and Yokosuka naval base was there. That was the biggest naval base in Japan. We would have lost hundreds of thousands of men.
Yeah, it's estimated a minimum of 500,000 men would have been lost.
No question.
And it's estimated well over 1 million Japanese would have been
Oh yes.
killed. Where was the first place you saw combat?
In Okinawa.
Okay.
And of course, we plane guarded. Our job was to protect the aircraft carriers. Actually, the smaller ones that were made, they were converted ships to made, and so we had 3 of those that we had to escort, and depending on where they were needed is where we ended up. And of
Did
course,
they call those Jeep carriers?
yeah.
Because Kaiser made them?
Yeah.
So when you say plane guarded, you're saying that your ship was basically next to these.
Well, not next to them. Well, we were in the area, in the target area, and don't forget there's 6 to 8 ships to that squadron.
Okay.
And these aircraft carriers were very slow, and they did their job, but they were not the first class carrier that we had later part of the war.
Okay.
You use your destroyers and other ships to protect the aircraft carrier.
Right.
So he was part of an aircraft carrier task force.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And you would have been in the 7th Fleet?
No, third.
Third Fleet?
Third Fleet.
But you were
No, I
also-
was in the 7th. We were in the 7th Fleet and then joined the Third Fleet.
Okay.
Yeah. And the Third Fleet was in New Guinea and further.
So what does fleet mean
Well, fleet is
as
the.
opposed to squadron?
Well, a squadron there are many squadrons in the fleet, and the fleet typically is made up of the commanding officer of that contingent of ships,
Okay.
so there was, and we had actually there were 3 destroyer squadrons that were part of the total fleet of the 7th Fleet, and these 2 fleets put together if we would have gone forward after August 12th, it would have been unbelievable looking at what could have happened at that time.
And so how many men per ship?
Well,
I have no idea.
Well, our ship had 295 enlisted men with 35 officers,
Okay.
and which is not large. It's about 2.5 football fields long. We had 5-inch 38 cannons, and we had quad or 40 millimeter, and we had twin 20 millimeters. So and of course we had torpedoes on the fantail, and also we had torpedoes that were in between the two stacks, and of course that was one of the needs for the destroyers, because they could torpedo some of the enemy.
Yep. And you were a gunner on a quad 20?
No, on a twin 20.
Twin 20, okay.
Yeah. And then I moved into radar. I sought after a job in the command post, which was very interesting. So I actually became a third-class petty officer, or a sergeant in the Army here, and actually did most of my general quarters in the communications of radar. Sugar
So
Charlie.
would that have been in the command and control center?
Oh yes,
Okay.
definitely.
That's the heart, the brain of the ship.
That's right.
So I'm just interested, when you joined, was there ever a thought that you could have died? Was that ever something that was entering your mind? Maybe I'm not going to live
not
through
at
this?
all. Except that when I received a letter in the mail from my mother, and stating that one of my closest friends in high school, and he joined the Army, because he wanted to be a paratrooper, and he joined the year before I went in, and he ended up being parachuted into Italy, and he was killed in the air, which is, and when I read that was the only time really that I felt close to what could happen.
And
then,
what was your friend's name?
Chick Mitchell.
Chick Mitchell.
And he had two sisters that were older than he, and his two sisters were a very close friend of my sister.
Did you know, to follow on from what Gwen was asking, did you know that your friends and family back home were praying for you?
Not really. At that time, I was not concerned about prayer. Although before I finished it, I did accept the Lord, and I did feel a different when we had the opportunity to take the Missouri into Tokyo Bay. That was a very moving thing, and then to be able to be given the responsibility of a rifleman on the starboard side of the ship. There were two riflemen, and in our job, that was a moving part of my life. It really was.
Can imagine. Interesting fact: one of the leaders of the Japanese fighters, the fighter aircraft, was named Fuchida, and after the war, he accepted Jesus Christ.
That's right. I did not know that.
Tell us about the battle at Okinawa.
Well, Okinawa was a tragedy, because they actually went underground during the daytime, and they would attack at night, and of course this was the last big push by the Japanese kamikazes, and they were just really taking men that were not prepared for death, and sending them out, and it was a miracle when your ship didn't get hit. And we lost two ships. As I said, we were down to six destroyers from the 8 typically, and we at Okinawa.
Yeah, I think that's another God thing that,
Yeah.
fortunately, the Japanese did not launch the kamikaze until October of I think 1944.
44, yeah.
If they had started their kamikazes in 42 or 43, they would have wreaked havoc.
Do you want to explain to us what kamikaze means?
Kamikaze is simply a person who goes into an aircraft, a Japanese aircraft, to commit suicide. His mission is to ram his plane into a ship,
Okay.
and they did.
Oh, they did.
So at first they didn't, you're saying? That wasn't...
When the war began, they did not use the kamikaze
Yeah,
strategy.
Iwo Jima was the first one.
Yep.
Yeah. And then Okinawa.
So what did you actually see? Or is that something you don't really want to remember? I mean,
Oh,
those
no, I
type
think-
of memories, I'm sure.
Well, I was a gunner on a 20 millimeter, and we actually shot down. We didn't really shoot it down because we saw the two pilots. They wore leather helmets.
They were that close?
Oh yeah, and they were, because they were going to hit us, and actually what happened is that there was our twin 20s, but also that we had quad 40s that were going heavy in here, and actually they hit their wing tip and flipped over and blew up, and so we like to say that we shot it down, but we really didn't.
We'll allow you to say you shot it down.
That's
Why
right.
would you say you didn't shoot it
Well,
down?
because to be honest, it hit the wings hit and flipped the ship over, the plane over, and it blew up. Yeah,
Those planes by that time were out of control.
Okay.
totally,
Well,
yeah.
it sounds like you shot it down. It wouldn't have done that flipping motion if you hadn't hit the wing.
we did get, the ship did get its honor to being a and actually it was a bomber. It was what they called a twin Betty bomber. It was a twin engine.
That'd have really done some damage.
Oh, yeah.
That would have
Oh, yeah.
sunk your ship.
Oh yeah.
So how many days or months or years, I don't, just so I can have this in my mind, that you were actually on a ship and in some type of,
22 months.
okay.
Yeah. And I was in the Navy, so I was in the Navy just about 3 months more than 22 months. So,
And so was there combat, were you prepared each time, and was it often? Was it once a week? Was it once a month? How
Well,
was that?
you couldn't, what depends on what theater they put you in. And of course, we headed from Guam to Okinawa because Okinawa was a very, very serious problem. And they were sending all of us there, and then we were heading north to Japan. And that's when the two fleets were going to meet. And the only time we were in the China Sea Typhoon. That's when the Hornet rolled up its flight deck,
Okay.
and that was a scary time. We couldn't eat or drink anything for 5 days. And,
Because of a storm?
oh
Is
yeah,
that what you're saying?
yeah, it's a terrible storm, and of course it was very close to where Philippines are today, and with what they've gone through.
A typhoon is a hurricane.
Yeah,
Okay.
Pacific is a hurricane. Yeah, and we lost 5 ships in that they flipped over and got.
I didn't think
Capsized.
it was possible to really flip over a ship
Well, it's
like
really
that.
not, except that if the engines failed and water got down those pipes, it stopped the engine, and then you're just at the mercy of the storm.
So for 5 days, you all huddled in some space, or
No,
I mean,
we actually we had to do whatever. We were left alone to just do whatever we had to do. We still had our jobs to do, which we could do, but we had sonar and that's the underwater. We had to be protective of that.
For submarines.
So it was just a time of some fear at that time, and of course we were blessed.
and did you know that other ships had capsized?
Oh yeah, we
You
saw
knew
them.
this.
Yeah, the Sullivan was capsized. That was the ship that the five brothers from Texas were on. They were all, and they stopped ever sending the family members together at that time.
So not only did you have an enemy, you had to deal with the elements of being out in sea.
That's correct, yes.
So a
Well,
lot of
that's a
uncertainty.
big part of war. It's not just facing the enemy, it's combating the elements.
That's right, particularly in in the Pacific.
So as you were saying, you were blessed that your ship did not capsize.
Well, we didn't get to that point, yes, because we had full service, full speed ahead, really, and of course we had to just keep moving because you couldn't just allow the engines to fail, because if that's what took the lives of many men in that typhoon.
So what do you think happened that their engines were flooded and yours weren't?
They just, who knows? They're the same kind of ships. They actually were, there was one larger class of ship, we call it, ours was a 2,100 ton, the Fletcher class, and the new one was a 2250, and that was one of the ships that capsized. So who knows?
And when it comes to war, some of these things you cannot explain.
That's right.
A friend is next to you one day and he's gone the next day.
We were tied up. We were tied to I said the Fox, and it was a different squadron, and they went out a day ahead of us, and so they were really in the heat of the action at Midway, which we would have probably been, and they lost the fantail of that ship, and then this young fellow that I had talked to just the day before was in the number 5 gun, and they were gone. That affected me in
Yep.
a great way. It really did.
Yep. And it's to be noted too that the kamikaze were strong on Okinawa because Okinawa is a home island of Japan.
Oh, absolutely.
It was part of Japan. And as we got closer and closer to Japan, they fought even more ferociously. By that point on Okinawa, the Japanese were strapping bombs on their backs and rolling under our tanks. And by that time, they were training women and children to do the same thing. They were the first terrorists, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And so why was that devotion there? Isn't it because they actually thought their emperor was God,
Yep.
divine? So
Yep.
they were willing to
If
give
you
their
died for
lives?
the emperor, you went to heaven.
Yeah. Well, of course, the trouble at Okinawa, as I said earlier, is they had a whole series of tunnels, and they were during the daytime they were not there to fight, and they came out at night, and I guess they did a terrible toll on the Marines. It really did, and the Army.
Now, was there a lot of camaraderie between the people on your ship?
Yes. Yeah. Well, the
There
enlisted
seemed
men.
to be a real unity there.
No question about it.
I mean, I've just heard that there's a lot of bonding that goes on when you're in the same,
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, it was
squadron
200,
or-
like I said, we're 295 men, and it was that close quarters, really. As some of our pictures show that where my bunk was, and we have a copy of our ship that's permanently on display at Baton Rouge on the Mississippi.
So there's an identical, or a copy of this ship.
Identical, yeah. It's a Fletcher class, and it's a USS Kidd, but it could have been the Hopewell or any of the other ones, and we copied the exact ship that we had in World War II. And of course, as they went into Korea, which was 5 years later, they had already redone a lot of the 5-inch 38 guns were removed for totally different
Updated it,
fireball, yeah.
modernized it.
So this ship, you were saying earlier, was for sale by the government?
No, it wasn't for sale. We wanted to have a ship on the Mississippi permanently, to show what the Fletcher class ship was. And like I said, there were 405 of them built, which is just remarkable that we did that. And so we bought it for the $100, and
I think that's amazing
Now, when
to
you
buy a
say
huge
we,
ship.
what organization is
it
that?
was just the Navy, the sailors that were on Hopewell.
Okay.
So and it took us about 10 years to raise enough money to redo this thing.
Oh, so not only did you just pay $100, then there was all the work needed to.
Sure, to completely.
Okay,
And
reconstruct it.
And the ship is exactly what it was when we were on board. Yeah.
And so this is now a museum. People can
Yes.
actually today go and visit it.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. And I was part of the dedication. Our commander was there. You saw a picture of him in there, and he was
So-
there.
If someone wanted to visit that, where would they go?
Baton Rouge,
Okay.
yeah.
Did you get to step foot on Okinawa?
No,
And where did you head after Okinawa?
we headed north we were heading north to Japan.
Okay.
Yeah, and we were involved in a we took one submarine, a Japanese submarine, and we had to let them know that the war was technically going to be over with what had happened.
Okay. And so on August 6th, we dropped the first bomb on.
August 12th. August 12th, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
At any rate, we dropped the bombs on Japan,
Right.
Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And so then what happened? What kind of orders did you get then?
We continued to move towards north to Japan because they weren't sure what was going to happen.
Okay.
And we had the two of them because we didn't really know what the atomic bomb was.
What did you think at that time?
It was just unbelievable. To hear that we had done, and they showed pictures. We saw pictures.
Did you see the mushroom cloud?
No, we saw after the cloud.
Okay,
After the cloud.
The aftermath.
Yeah, and that was just unbelievable. Just hard. And of course, that was the first one, and the second one was just 3-4 days later.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you were saying because there had been these bombings, that is why the fleets weren't destroyed to the extent they could have been. Because that really was so effective to protect.
Oh, yeah, they had no chance of coming out of this. Yeah, because those bombs were just unbelievable.
And plus the Soviet Union was coming into the war also.
Right.
So it's estimated, I don't know if we mentioned this earlier in the telecast or not, that if we had not used the atomic bombs, a minimum of 500,000 American soldiers would have died in the invasion.
Absolutely, no question about it.
Okay, so you believe the bombs
I do.
saved people's lives.
I do. We were.
And that includes Japanese lives.
Oh, absolutely. Well, no, they would have been more than that.
Yeah, they would have lost over a million more people.
Now, why would that be? Because I've always heard that the bombings did so much, killing of the Japanese.
Actually, the firebombing of Dresden and other other cities killed more people than Nagasaki and Hiroshima. The firebombings were worse than the atomic bomb.
Really? Okay.
And it saved lives because if we had invaded, we would have lost another 500,000 men.
Oh, no question. They had caves built right in the sides of the mountains that we wouldn't even know they were there. We saw those. They were still. When we went in the first time, before we stayed there for 2 months in Tokyo Bay, and we could go into Yokohama, and of course you could see what we would have had to do. It was terrible.
So so you're saying also there would have been more loss of Japanese lives, and that didn't occur because there wasn't the actual combat.
Because of the atomic bombs.
Okay.
Yep.
I just remember in high school almost reading as if this was not such a good thing that we had done. You know, I never saw or read anything positive until today.
Well, Gwen,
hearing
do you know
this.
the approximate number of people that were killed by those 2 bombs?
No, I don't.
Well, it was approximately, now this is the direct effect of the bomb. There were after effects from the radiation, but the direct bombing killed about 150,000 people.
Right.
That's compared to another 500,000 Americans, probably another million Soviet Union troops, probably between 1 million to 2 million more Japanese dead if they did not surrender. They were going to fight with women and children to the bitter end. And there's films of this training.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, the original government saw this, that this had to be, that they had to do what they did, the Japanese, really, no question about it.
So tell us about Tokyo Bay.
Well, that's quite interesting. Of course, we were there with our squadron, and also that I told you the other squadron from the 3rd Fleet, and we were allowed to go to. They set up a beer garden in Yokohama, and
What does that mean? A beer garden?
well, that's where you could go and get a couple. I forget how many beers you could get, but we could get maybe 2 or 3 beers, and then we had to go back to the ship. We'd meet each day. There would be one of the ships had to pick up the men from each one of the other ships, and then they would take us in with what they call a whale boat, or a captain's. They call them captain's gigs and whale boats, and they would hold maybe 10, 15 people, and so they'd take them and go in for that 3 or 4 hours. Probably it wasn't even 3 or 4 hours.
So this is
2 or 3 hours.
all about a celebration,
We
right?
call this rest and recuperation.
R&R.
R&R.
Okay, so but for people who are listening, they may not understand what you're really talking about when you say, "What were you at the bay?" And you're-
Tokyo Bay.
Tokyo Bay. You're referring to the actual surrendering and signing of papers, and this was all part of the celebration.
That was the first part of it. We took the Missouri in, and the Missouri.
Well, now you went in before the Missouri, right?
No, we went in ahead of the Missouri.
And what was the purpose of you going in ahead?
But because we were unsure of the chain fencing that
Right.
on the entrance,
So you were checking for the net,
and we're checking for
for sea mines,
mines that were loose
and for any
mines
reaction by the Japanese.
on the
So
hillsides.
what
On the
you-
mountains.
You were the guinea pig.
Yeah, we were. That's right.
So what you're saying is you weren't very trusting that this was really going to take place, and it was maybe a setup.
Well, we didn't. We unfortunately, being at our age and our training, they didn't really give us a lot of information.
Well, I
Okay.
think what she's referring to is when you need to know that as the war progressed, Japanese soldiers would surrender, and then when they got close to the Americans, they would blow themselves up.
With the Americans.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so there was a lot of trepidation going in. Are they really sincere, or is this just another ambush? Is
Yes,
that-
very definitely. Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
So you were the first that came in, and then,
Our squadron was the first squadron to go
Okay.
in, yes. And then I think that the 3rd Fleet was the 25th squadron. I'm not sure of that number, but ours was the 21st squadron.
okay, and so you arrived, you guys survived, and then the next arrival occurred, and then this
No,
image
we
that-
just went. We cleared the path to go into Tokyo Bay, and then it was our responsibility to take and bring the Missouri, which was a great big battleship. I mean, it was a big. We don't even have those type in the Navy anymore, because the aircraft carrier is really what it's taken over.
Okay. So then, did you actually see the,
Japanese delegation.
We saw the delegation because they took them up in smaller boats, but we could not get up on board. It was just, there were thousands of men, hanging everywhere on the guns
In order just to be
to
prepared?
be there. No, just to be there.
Okay.
Be there to watch the signing.
This was history. There were people who wanted to be there.
Right.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
And this signing took place on a ship then?
Yeah, on the battleship Missouri.
Okay.
Douglas MacArthur led the American delegation. I believe he let General Wainwright sign some documents.
He did.
Wainwright had been captured by the Japanese and held prisoner
Correct there.
since 1941.
Yeah.
Or 42 rather.
So after the signing, what then took place?
Well, actually, after the signing, what we did is we took control of Japan and we decommissioned them and.
Were these men that signed, were they taken as hostages,
Oh no!
prisoners?
Oh no!
What happened to
No.
them?
Well, that's a good question.
They returned
they
to
were-
their homes and
They were government and yeah.
now there were trials in Japan afterwards, and General Tojo and some other people were tried as war criminals.
Yeah, right. Yes.
And for what they did in China, they were indeed war criminals. It was terrible. So you got to go to Yokohama.
Yeah. And Yokosuka, which is the naval base.
Tell me about the first Japanese people you met after the surrender.
The people that were actually could speak English would because there was an American athletic club in Yokohama.
Okay.
And they were I would say they understood what the problem was and they knew that they had been defeated.
You know, a very interesting thing is when the emperor came on the radio to surrender, that was the first time the Japanese people had heard their emperor's voice.
How was that?
They had never heard it before.
And they never saw him, actually.
No.
Yeah.
And so MacArthur he took a very famous photograph. MacArthur stood next to the emperor, and MacArthur was very tall, and the emperor was very short. This was Emperor Hirohito. And the purpose of that picture was to show the Japanese people that they had a new emperor. And it came across very clearly in that photograph.
What do you mean they had a new emperor?
They knew by looking at that photograph that a new man was in charge.
Okay.
So it was all because we didn't know how the Japanese people were going to react to all this. There were many people in America who wanted the emperor hanged.
Oh, absolutely.
He should have been hung as a
War criminal.
As a war criminal.
Yes.
I mean, they slaughtered the Chinese and other people, the Filipinos.
So what happened? He was tried as a war criminal.
No, he
No,
was
he
not
wasn't.
tried.
It was never tried. Yeah.
Was that part of the negotiation?
MacArthur got him off the hook. MacArthur convinced the U.S. government that the Japanese should be permitted to keep the emperor.
Okay.
But what we did was we imposed a new system of government in Japan, almost like our constitutional republic. So, fascinating stuff.
You mentioned at one point during the war, I think, that you did become a believer.
Yes. Actually, it was it was in Tokyo Bay.
And
Yeah.
why at Tokyo Bay? What were there men on your ship who were overt believers? Did you see men
No,
reading the
no.
Bible or praying?
Not very much. No.
So
Very little.
what was it that caused you at
Well, the
Tokyo Bay?
Well, the largeness of what we were doing, what we had done with Japan. I mean, you know, they tried to annihilate us, and we won. And that was and is today a very emotional thing.
So you felt a sense of humility before God and having made it through those 22 months?
I'm not sure of that at that time. My faith grew much more after I got out and went to college and
And then you could
married.
look back on all that and say,
That was a very, very important part of my life. Yeah,
yes.
no
Jack,
question.
who was instrumental in bringing you to the Lord?
Well, Jerry Kirk probably,
Okay.
Oh, of the Presbyterian Church, North College Hill.
North College Hill.
Okay.
and Rick Schatz, who is also was a confidant of Jerry's. Those two, I would say those two were very, very important in my growth.
And did you go to North College Hill Presbyterian?
No, I went to Knox Presbyterian.
Okay.
And then from there I went to Kenwood Baptist, and with Alex Aronis, who was I'd mentioned he was a Navy chaplain, and he became a Baptist preacher, and then from there we went to Horizons almost 10 years ago, and been Horizons ever since, and we helped start for Faith Christian Fellowship, which is with the school.
And the school is?
The
Miami Valley?
Miami Valley Christian Academy, yes. Mm-hmm.
Right, well, can we take a brief pause here while Gwen raises some money?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. So we hope that you have enjoyed this broadcast, and our prayer is that you'll be interested in supporting this broadcast. And in order to do that, you can mail to the Watchman Report, LLC, to this address, 407 Elm Avenue, Terrace Park, Ohio, 45174, so this broadcast can continue. And you can also watch past Watchman Report programs on YouTube by searching the Watchman Report with Alan Singler. And then I can give some contact information.
Sure, go ahead.
So if you're interested and you would like to directly talk to Al, call 513-279-8350 or write at this email address, SinglerAllen, no spaces, all small letters, @yahoo.com. And again, you can watch past broadcasts on YouTube, The Watchman Report, and for this particular broadcast with Alan Singler or Jack Rendemore.
I'd like to also add that, as many of you know, there have been a lot of end-time news this week concerning Iran. There are two very important articles that I wrote, and another with a word of God from a friend of mine concerning Israel on my blog. And you can go to that by going to www.grassrootconservative.blogspot.com. These articles are Watchman Report 13468, the Iran Update, Peace in Our Time, Watchman Report 13469, Iran already has the bomb, and Watchman Report 13470, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel. And I think you'll find all three of those articles and more articles on the blog that would be of great interest to you. And now back to Jack. Jack, when did you get out of the Navy?
Well, got out of the Navy in 46, and then had to. I tried to go to the University of Cincinnati, and I needed to get a high school diploma because I was already, in June of 45 is when I would have graduated, but I was gone, and so I had to get my degree first, and then.
Well, that's an interesting question. How did they handle veterans like you who interrupted their high school years to enlist in the services?
Well, we had to get special dispensation to get that, and they
Did you get that from your high school?
Yeah, from the high
Okay.
school. Yeah.
All right.
From Withrow.
And what did you study at UC?
Marketing and accounting.
Okay. And by the way, Jack is a big Bearcat fan.
Yeah, certainly.
And you went into business.
Yeah, correct.
And what was the first business you started?
Well, in the sporting goods business, I had
Okay.
a chain of sporting goods stores. Yeah.
And you were also in the moving business.
Well, that was all separate. And I was in commercial real estate.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, for a long time. Yeah.
Okay. So, Jack, it's been 72 years. As you look back on Pearl Harbor and World War II today, what are your thoughts and feelings?
Well, I think that the Lord really was with us, and particularly with some of the fighting that we did. There was really no reason that we could have won, particularly at Midway. That was, and I think if you can look at some of the TV specials on that, and I think that they reflect that God was there.
Yep. No doubt about it. It was an act of God that we were able to not only get the Japanese codes, the naval code, the diplomatic code, but actually through the help of a Pole, and this story isn't told very often, through a Polish citizen, we were able to gain control of the Enigma machine, which was the German code, which helped us to win the war on the European front.
Right.
Give us some more of your feelings looking back 72 years. I mean, it's a totally different world now
Oh,
from
yes.
what you grew up in.
Oh, it certainly is. It's very sad what's happened to our country.
Okay?
And the leadership is, as far as I'm concerned, is not good.
And it hasn't been, I mean, don't let me put words in your mouth, but it hasn't been good for a long time.
Well, yeah, that's right. There's several presidents.
Yes.
Yes.
There's been a turning away from God as a nation.
Oh, yes.
And our hope and prayer as believers is that we can intercede as we are asked to do so in Scripture, to pray for those who are in leadership. But overall, it's God's choice and decision as to what's to take place. So the question is, are people ready for what are going to be soon more and more the end time events? Like we were mentioning earlier at this broadcast, that the rapture of the saints is maybe not that far away.
Do you agree with that?
Oh, yes, I do.
As you look back on the 1940s and the war in that, what convinces you that we're near the end times?
Well,
Besides the Bible, of course.
yeah. Well, I think probably by the Japanese doing what they did, and our strength as a nation at that time was tremendous, and which we don't have today. We've lost so much of that.
You know, and that's a question I often ask people. I'll say in August 1945, who were the enemies of the United States?
Good question.
Do you know who they worked with?
There weren't any more, were there?
There were no enemies. In August 1945, after Japan surrendered, we had no enemies. It wasn't until later that the Soviet Union became our enemies.
That's right.
We were on top of the world. Now let's go to 2013. Who are our enemies today?
Oh,
Where do you want to begin?
The Middle East.
Middle East, Cuba, Venezuela, China, North Korea. Where does it start and end?
Absolutely.
Our enemies are all over the place now. So we've gone from, I like to say we've gone from Pax Americana, P-A-X, to Pax Americana, P-O-X.
Very good.
So, anything else you want to add before we wrap up this telecast?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to meet with you both, and it's been very enjoyable.
Jack, you're always welcome here.
Thank you.
You're a great guest.
Thank you.
May Yahweh bless you, and may Yahweh protect you. May Yahweh shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May Yahweh lift up his face unto you and give you peace in the name of the Prince of Peace, Yeshua HaMashiach. And God bless.